with that, we'll have Chief Dion Campbell come and join us. Yay, Dion.
If I can sit in this chair,
oh,
I can fit in here.
You're going to be great. Dion, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Dion. I know it's, first of all, I love calling you Chief.
Okay.
Secondly, I know you're very busy, and we in Michigan City, I just want to say thank you to you and the entire police force for what you do every day. And we talked earlier about how beautifully you handled the rioting, the group gathering back months or so ago outside of Lighthouse Place. And we are so fortunate to have you and your team and the police officers in Michigan City supporting and guiding and keeping us safe. So I just want to say truly thank you for you personally and for your entire team for what you do.
Well, thank you. On behalf of the entire Michigan City Police Department, I'm very appreciative to be here. I love this organization. I think that you do a fabulous job here. You know, I'm just sitting here contemplating why this organization is so important. And one of the things that came to my mind was how you have raised the consciousness of this region when it comes to the well-being of our children. And, you know, we all can get into a place where we could tend to look the other way or act as if we don't see the signs. But I think one of the most important things that this organization has done is it's raised the consciousness of people, of all of us, about what's most important. And then secondly, you've acted as a divine interruption to people whose lives have been on a downward spiral or on a trajectory that was not very good. And I think that this group in particular has acted as a divine intervention to stop and change the future of many, many lives. So I'm appreciative to be here. I am the one that is honored, and our city is blessed to have you here for the work that all of you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dion. And I've known Dion for a long time, and maybe I think it'd be fun for the listeners to hear a little bit just about you, Dion.
Okay.
Like, you're from Michigan City, and
okay. Yes, a very unique story. I'm here from, I was raised in Michigan City, not born. I was born in Lafayette, Louisiana, but I was raised in Michigan City right there on the west side. West Side, hey.
Yeah, yay.
And
yay, West Side.
Actually went to Marquette and St. Mary's Catholic schools, which was fabulous for me. Then ended up going to Oklahoma State and then Indiana State, and ended up back in Michigan City and got into law enforcement, and here I am today.
There you are.
Yes.
And you were in the school systems, correct, for a long time?
Yes, I was in the school system. That was a very, very, very valuable time. And it was in a time frame where people did not want police officers in the school, because the perception is that at that time was that there was a prison to pipeline and that we were facilitating that. But I think that having a school resource officer, having a police officer in the schools turned out to be very, very pivotal, and that we learned to bridge the gap between the community and law enforcement. I think they acted as a first line of defense in changing the perspective of what policing is, the ability to build relationships with not only the students, but with parents, with staff, and to have that last a lifetime. It helped people to see law enforcement in a completely different light, and it helped to build a valuable relationship with our community.
Right. But I have to say, Dion, a lot of that happened because of how you are. I mean, you're extremely friendly, you're extremely outgoing, you're extremely good in a conflict situation. I mean, one of the things we discussed before we came on air was during the recent conflicts, or I would imagine in any conflict situation you deal with, because you had that experience, that personal experience with meeting so many families. I mean, when you work in the school system, you kind of feel like you know the entire town. So to a certain extent, or especially those who are having challenges in their life, as you say. You know, and as Dunebrook tries to intercede and educate and support families who have serious challenges, so does the police department and your mission and what you do. You're coming upon people who have said, so you have a way of making people not be defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to them, and that is a gift. So when you say, wow, the police were in the schools and that just happened where all of a sudden we weren't seen as, the opposition, I have to say, I think that's because of how you are.
I appreciate that. I really think that I am a product of the best of what Michigan City represents. When I grew up, community was very important.
Yeah.
Building relationships was very important. Even though there were black and white issues, people got along. We were a very diverse community. And at the end of the day, our community was based on love. And I think that I'm a product of that. Yeah. And unfortunately, the world in which we live in, which affects Michigan City, has changed. Things are not the same anymore. And I think that at the core level of what we need and are missing in this world is love and compassion for other people. Right. And I think that that's a missing link. You won't find that component in any book or in any manual, but at the end of the day, that's what it was all about. And for me, I love people and I love my community. And I think that that's what all of us who do the type of jobs that we do, I think that that is the primary driver of who we are. And when we see things that are out of alignment and things that are dysfunctional, there's a burden upon people like us to just step in and take our place and do what is necessary to fix the problem and be solutionists rather than those that complain about what's going on.
Or blame.
Yes, but hey, I see the issue. And one of the things I truly believe is that you have sight into an issue or it really, really bothers you, then you're the one that fix it. A lot of people will point to someone else. Well, who needs to do this? If it becomes that highlighted to you, maybe that means that you're the person that's supposed to step up to the plate and fix the problem. So let's all be solutionists.
See, and we talk about that in the world of child abuse. Oftentimes when we do education with adults, it's whom as a school counselor, I didn't know if that bump on the face was really that they fell down or did something happen at home. So one of the things we talk about is if you see something, world out there, community members, say something. Call the police, call DCS. I think that's what you're saying, Dion, is take the initiative to get involved. You don't need to know how to do it. There's not a perfect way, but talk to someone about something that you're concerned about or something that you see. Yes. Because the police are very good about handling things, if you would, instead of letting it blow up. Yeah,
I agree. I think that we all have to remember that no one can do life alone and that we need each other very, very much. I have children. 4 children, and I've done my best as a parent. My wife and I have done our best as parents to help them, but I do recognize that through their journey, there have been other people who have stepped in and been very pivotal in their development, and if they had not have stepped in, it could have turned out in a different way for my children. And so through that lens, I feel that there's a responsibility upon us that when we have the opportunity to step in and make a difference in someone else's life, that we do that. My mind goes back to a time when I'm sitting in my office at the high school, and this girl came in, young lady came in, and she was very, very troubled. And I could have very easily dismissed it as, okay, it's just another, But, from my training, from understanding what can literally happen, she was trying to tell me something that she couldn't articulate. And so as I began to probe, and because she was able to trust me, she began to tell me about the abuse that her father had done to her. And, she was a student that had been acting out on a regular basis, but at the root of the problem was not something in her personality. It was something that was being done to her that she could not handle. So she gave me this story, and it upset me. And I left the high school to go and deal with the problem immediately. It was very interesting. While I'm leaving the high school, I'm at making a turn. I see this vehicle that was driving haphazardly. And so I turned around and stopped it. And it was this young lady's father.
Oh, my goodness.
Who was drunk.
Oh,
and was going to take her out of school because he wanted to do what he had been doing to her.
Oh.
And so we ended up making an arrest on him. And after he was arrested, The young lady, we directed her to a counselor. She began to tell her story and found out all the things that had been done to her. And she finally felt safe because he was locked up, and then he was charged for everything that he had done to her. Oh. And for me, that was a very pivotal moment because I saw her years later, and she thanked me profusely for stepping in. Right. And I think that that's the spirit of Michigan City, who we really are. You know, just to go back to your question, I think that those moments are very pivotal in all of our lives to make us realize that could have been my son. That could have been my daughter. Right. And someone has to step up to the plate and make a difference. Right. Yeah.
So only for the fact that that day when you were in your office and she came in, you could have brushed it off or not dealt with her just because you were busy maybe or no knows what. Right. But you took the time to listen.
Right. It comes back to the influence that I talked about that this organization has. Mm-hmm. There's a heightened understanding and awareness for things that you could casually just push to the side. And once someone pushes an agenda against the societal norms or what's not very popular, it brings it to our attention and we become more aware. And that's why when you extended this invitation to me, I was like, okay, you guys have had an impact on my life. You've had an impact on many lives in the city, and I felt obligated to do this. Right. And plus, I kind of like you because you were my counselor. And you still got this thing over me where I look at you and I kind of cringe. So when I get the invitation, you didn't know this. I was like, oh, this is my counselor. I gotta go. Yeah, that's a side note.
Right, that's a little side note. Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah. Oh, Dion, that is so funny. Yeah. You are so sweet. Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I think that, but that's what I mean about your character, and you were like that when you were a youngster. I mean, you were just a kind, gentle soul, but bright and very driven, and we're very fortunate to have Dion. One of the things I would like to talk about is just Michigan City on the whole, and how are we doing, not only with the pandemic, but, you know, with the racial inequality issue and how well you handled that situation. You talked very briefly about the Black Lives Matter, and I think it might be very interesting for our listeners to hear your take on the Black Lives Matter and just nationally what's happened with that group and the pluses and the minuses, maybe.
I think that we're all behind the Black Lives Matter movement in full agreement with some of the tragedies that have happened between the law enforcement agencies and the African American community. And I think one of the things that struck a chord with our nation was that for the first time that we have seen is nationwide law enforcement agencies said, hey, this event was wrong. We are against it as well. Right. And I think that went a lot into gaining public trust, that we actually admitted that something we did was wrong, because typically law enforcement has been very silent when it comes to those things because we see things from a different lens. Right. And so the whole Black Lives Matter protest is a very interesting phenomenon. Some people agree with it, some people don't agree with it. And me personally, I agree with the Black Lives Matter movement, but not necessarily with the organization. Within the preamble of the organization, it basically comes against father figures being in the home or the patriarchal system. And by statistics, I understand that when you remove a father out of the family pattern, the destruction that comes with that. Statistics show a downward spiral in any person's life that doesn't have a father figure there. And so for me, that kind of distances me from the organization, but not the movement. I totally agree with the movement. I think most of us are against anything that is wrong to any injustice to any person. You know, our protest here was very interesting in the fact that there was the Black Lives Matter movement, but underneath that there was an anti-government group that literally hijacked it and were using it for their own personal purposes, to further their own agenda. And they utilized Black Lives Matter movement to get that done. And, you know, there were some professional protesters within our protest who were there strictly to create violent situations and antagonize people. They were throwing eggs at us. They were throwing water bottles at us. And, you know, I have to commend our department, the leadership of our department, for how they handled that situation, because it could have turned out very, very different than what it did. Right,
right. And again, what I hear you saying is, in any organization, whether it's a police department, I mean, there's, my goodness, Hollywood, the Catholic Church. I mean, we all need to take a look at our organizations and say the people that are not doing good things within those organizations need to be looked at.
Yes.
And for us to open our hearts and say, and be vulnerable and say, okay, let's see what's working right with us, what's not working right.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think reform in law enforcement is going to happen. But for Michigan City, there is a national narrative of law enforcement, and Michigan City does not fit that narrative.
Can you explain that, Dion, what you mean by that? I think that's really important to hear for our listeners.
Because we are police officers, we represent an entity. And something that happens in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with the police department there affects people's perspective on the Michigan City Police Department, even though we had no involvement with that.
Yes.
And I think one of the things about the protest here and having someone that we knew nothing about who was filming this that had 5,000 followers is it gave our city an inside look at law enforcement and how we interact with the community in stressful situations. And I think it changed a lot of the perspectives that, hey, Michigan City Police Department is not perfect, but we do not fit the national narrative. What we have here is pretty good. Our officers are pretty good. And I think that inside look did something to the community. And I think that's one of the reasons we haven't had any more issues like that. But in fact, we've had an outpouring of support and love from the community like I've never seen.
And just for those who might be unaware how well Dion and the team of police officers handled that situation months ago outside Lighthouse Place. If you didn't see it, it was miraculous in the sense that you and your team kept that entire group. You listened, you were patient, you heard what they said, and you calmed it down, and it could have gone another way. So I think what I hear you saying is people saw that because someone taped it. So we aren't some of these other areas that have such divisive on both sides.
Yes. Yeah. I'll give you an instance of what happened. There got to a point where one of our lieutenants was hit in the head with a brick. And that action is enough for us to go ahead and engage, which could have turned things very, very violent, right? One of our corporals had the wherewithal to say, no, we still got this situation. We've been peaceful for 5 hours. Let's not let this situation get out of hand. Even though we have the right to engage them, the bigger picture is at hand. This is what one of our younger corporals, he makes this decision. And one of our lieutenants was hit in the head. They held their ground. They understood the bigger picture was more important. And they requested that I come to the scene at that time. And my years of being a school resource officer, I looked into the hostile crowd whose goal at this time was to loot the Lighthouse Mall. This was 6-7 hours after the original protest. We had a group of about 300, and their goal was to get into the Lighthouse Mall and to tear that place apart, which would adversely affect our community, the business community, and it just would not have been very good. And we went into the crowd and began to talk to them and listen to them. And what I could see was anger, frustration, and hurt. And it was hard for them to really combat what I was saying. They were yelling, man, that's fine, you can do that. But at the end of the day, because of a track history of consistency and building relationships with the community, they understood, hey, okay, you're right. And that's when the crowd dispersed. You know, so it was a very interesting, intense situation, and we learned a lot from that. And I think the community looked at our department in a different light and said that that's not the national narrative. We're a little bit different, and that's the thing that we're working for now in Michigan City. Things are not perfect in Michigan City. Nationally, there's an uptick in violence, an uptick in gun possession, gun usage. I think the combination of coming out of a difficult political situation here in Michigan City, then moving into COVID-19, then all the protests, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of people who are feeling lost into translation, and they're responding to that. And unfortunately, as a law enforcement agency, those are the things that we're dealing with. One of the most tumultuous times in the history of our nation, and we're dealing with things that we have never seen before. And we're having to come up with policies for things that have no blueprint.
Right.
And, you know, and it's been stressor after stressor after stressor.
Right.
And
in a short period of time.
Yeah.
Big stressors in a
correct.
very short period of time.
Correct. And I think we're at a very critical time as to what direction it will go. And that's what we're fighting for,
right.
to build and maintain our relationship with the community, to keep our officers. One of the things that people don't realize right now is we're having a difficult time keeping people in place in law enforcement agencies because police officers don't want to do the job anymore because they felt underappreciated, they felt attacked. The job is as difficult as it is, especially for those officers who will say, yeah, we disagree with what happened with George Floyd and the other. That has nothing to do with us, but we're getting hit with that.
Right.
And
labeled.
Is it worth doing this job anymore?
Right.
And we are all thankful for the way that the citizens of Michigan City have responded, and through the black, white people, all the people, Hispanic, they have shown us great love and support. And the push and driver for our community is to not let what's happening nationally slide into Michigan City and change the culture that we have.
And what advice would you give or counsel, Dion, to General Michigan City, given what you just said? How can we be supportive of the police department and of each other? I know that's $1 million question, but is there anything the average person can do in our community that you think, either in the short term, given we talked a little bit about our political environment, which is very contentious, if you would, in come election, that could be a problem no matter who wins. So what advice would you give to our community where we can support the police department and support the police officers? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I just think that we have to go back to basic values and the simplicity of things like love, compassion, communication, respect for our neighbors, people that we deal with every day. Have those conversations, walk away from judgmentalism. Everyone needs to stop saying my position is right. Yeah. We're engaging, we're dividing ourselves about non-essential things. Yeah, and we're forgetting the humanistic part of who we are. I think we just need to go back to being a good neighbor, and start right there at home and begin to build our families again, teach our families, and get back to the basics, because we've gone far away from the simplistic things, which has been the foundation of who we are. And once you destroy the foundation, it destabilizes everything. And so we've got to find a way to get back to the basics of just being good people again. And I think that is the key, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice, Dion, to being a good person. And when you're out in the world, if you're at the grocery store, if you're driving, if you're your neighbor, just to be patient, be kind, maybe give someone a smile if they cut you off in traffic instead of doing some other nasty, not nice thing. You know, to be kind and patient, especially during this time. So I think that's really good advice. And especially with all the parents and schools starting and the anxiety about COVID and
I think everyone needs to take a step back and start to think again, to begin to process, and to come to a place of realization that there are strong thought processes in the earth through media which are vying for our mentalities and trying to influence the way we think. And one of the things that I've had to do was shut off the television, shut off social media, and get away and just begin to think through some things and say, wait, I'm being influenced negatively and I didn't even realize it. There's such a conforming and shaping principle in our world that I take a step back and settle in my heart what type of person I'm going to be and who I am. And despite the opposition that I face, despite people's opinions, I'm going to be true to myself and choose that pathway to walk in despite what's going on in our world.
So all the noise, and especially with social media, all the negative noise that's going on, you're saying take time to settle ourselves individually.
Yeah, I like that. Still the noise. We have to still the noise. And one of the things that I found even during quarantine is it gave us all an opportunity to begin to self-reflect. And for me, that was the beauty of the quarantine, is that I came to a realization that I've been so busy doing life that I didn't take time out to just evaluate myself first and foremost, and then take a look at my family and decide what type of people are we going to be. And it was very detoxifying for me during the quarantine. It was actually very good that and it seemed like the noise started to die down. And now the noise is coming back. I've already got a settled position of who I want to be and the type of person I'm going to be, and it helps me to go forward into the future. And I think that that's what we're vying for right now, is the future. And this is a very critical time as to what is Michigan City going to be coming up in the future. What type of people are we going to be? That's up to us. Culture development is a real thing, and leadership is very important. And I think it's a time for all leaders to step up and to take their place and to do what's right, not for themselves, but on behalf of the people and what's best for the community.
So for us to individually take responsibility and take a leadership role, even if it's in our own family, let alone our neighborhood, let alone our county, our city and county, to take that leadership role, because we do have a choice. We can jump on the bandwagon and some of the negative, ugly noise that's going on and join that, or we can center ourselves, as you say, think about what we want to have happen, and how do we deal with that in the world, I guess is what I hear you saying.
That's correct. You know, one of the challenges before all this happened, we talked to our department, and we told the entire department that we want you to see yourselves differently. Law enforcement is about to change. Before this happened, and we talked about leadership, how every officer had to deal with people from a leadership position, which means that you're going to come across people with different attitudes, different understandings, different places in life, and you cannot take that personally, but you have, as a leader, you have to be able to locate where they're at and meet them where they're at and start the process of walking them towards where they need to be. Other than, you know, one of the things that I clearly understand is that a manifestation always leads to a root issue. And we as human beings, we tend to judge people on manifestations. What do I mean by that? You take a dandelion, and if you tear it up at the top, it will continue to grow back. The only way to stop that dandelion from growing is to get to the root issue. And I think that as a society, we look at manifestations in people, and we can't deal with people because we're too taken back by that flower that we see, the manifestation, when the issue is below the surface. And if we can get below the surface and begin to deal with the root issues, and I think that's a very powerful concept for police, because, you know, one of the things that you saw was the patient. I think that we are developing that hey, this is a person, life has shaped them into something that they may not even realize who they are. And that's where policing is changing, is the ability to look beyond that and to be able to speak to the root issue of the problem in helping people to go further. And that's why I think police officers have to be leaders. It's a difficult position. You not only have to be athletic, you have to be compassionate, but you not only have to be a guardian of the community, but then there are times you have to be a warrior. You know, I don't want to sell this soft approach where where everything is nice and lovely. There are times when you need police officers to be warriors, and we will always be that. But we also have to be guardians of our community, according to the situation in which we're dealt with.
Well, those are words of wisdom, Dion, and we are very fortunate to have you leading our Michigan City Police Department. So thank you so very much. And we could talk forever. Is there anything else you want to add today or say to us or the community?
I'm just appreciative for you, because I think that these type of conversations start the wheels to turning, and I think that that's what's needed. I think we need more dialogue with these opposing frames of thought. People need to sit down and begin to talk, and we'll realize that at the end of the day, we're mostly after the same things. And dialogues like we're having today are very, very important. You know, people need to be able to see how people like us who are different physically aren't far away internally, that we really are after the same thing. So dialogue is very important.
And when you have, even again in the political environment, differences of opinion, just listen to the other side. You don't have to agree with them, but just listen to the other side.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, with that, Dion, I wish you all the best. Thank you for being here. We will keep you in our thoughts and prayers, and the entire force and your lovely family.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And how I always end the show is saying, to be kind to yourselves. Respect the fact that it is a difficult time. And as Dion said, take time out to center yourself and think about, how do I want to be today? We do have a choice. You have a choice. When people are different, the diversity issue, when people are different, you don't have to judge. You can try to understand people who are different and be kind, not only to yourself, but be kind to others in the community every day. So thank you so much. And that's the end of our show. Megan, Pam, anything online that we're seeing questions? No? We're good for the day. So thank you very much, Dion. Have a good day, everyone.